They say blood is thicker than water. But what happens when your own blood makes you feel like you're drowning? My name is Emma Richardson, and this is the story of the night my family's perfect facade shattered into 1,000 pieces. I sat in my car that cold November afternoon, rain pelting the windshield, staring at my childhood home in the Chicago suburbs. The 2-story colonial house looked perfect from the outside manicured lawn, autumn decorations, golden light pouring from the windows. But I knew better. I'd always known better. You can do this, I whispered to myself, gripping the steering wheel. It's just one dinner. Just one more dinner. I pulled up to the house, grabbed the store-bought pie from the passenger seat, and forced myself to walk up that stone pathway. Before I could knock, the door swung open. My sister Chelsea stood there in a designer dress, perfect hair, holding a glass of wine. Her greeting was as cold as the November air. "Oh, you actually came. Mom invited me," I said quietly. "It's Thanksgiving. Mom invites you out of obligation, Emma. There's a difference." She stepped aside reluctantly, and I walked into the warmth that was never really meant for me. The house was stunning, decorated with fall colors, the smell of roasted turkey filling the air. But the warmth was only surface deep. It always had been. Chelsea had always been the golden child. Straight A's, perfect marriage to a lawyer named Marcus. 2 beautiful kids. I was the disappointment. The one who chose art school over law. The one who got divorced at 25. The one who never quite measured up, no matter how hard I tried. My mother, Patricia, was in the living room arranging flowers. At 58, she was still elegant, controlled, wearing pearls, and that forced smile I'd seen my entire life. "Emma, you're late," she said without looking up. "Traffic was. We're celebrating tonight. Chelsea's promotion to partner at the firm. Try to blend in, please." The words stung, but I swallowed the pain. I'd been swallowing it for 28 years. The dining room was set like something from a magazine. Crystal glasses, china plates, candles flickering. Around the table sat my family, Mom, my father Richard, Chelsea, and Marcus. Their 2 kids coloring in the corner, and my Aunt Diane and Uncle Tom. Dad had always been different from Mom. Quieter, gentler. But over the years, he'd retreated into himself, like a man carrying a weight too heavy to share. When I entered, he looked up briefly, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Sadness, guilt. I couldn't tell. "Emma, good to see you, sweetheart," he said softly. But before I could respond, Mom cut in. "Richard, the wine. We need to toast Chelsea's achievement." Dad stood mechanically and poured the wine. Mom raised her glass with that proud smile she'd never given me. "To Chelsea. Partner before 30. Everything we dreamed of." Everyone toasted. I lifted my glass, but those words cut deep. Everything we dreamed of. The implication was clear and like me. My Aunt Diane turned to me with that condescending tone I'd heard 1,000 times. "And Emma, dear, how's the art thing going?" The table went quiet. The question hung in the air like an insult. "It's going well," I started. "I just had a piece accepted into a gallery and—" "That's nice," Mom interrupted. "Marcus, tell us about the Jensen case." My achievement was dismissed before I could finish the sentence. Marcus launched into a self-congratulatory story while I sat there, a ghost at my own family's table. But I caught my father watching me, his expression pained in a way I'd never seen before. Dinner dragged on. There was laughter, stories, but I was invisible. I helped clear plates, carrying dishes to the kitchen, trying to be useful, trying to earn some scrap of approval. Mom followed me into the kitchen. She arranged dessert plates with surgical precision, not looking at me. "I need you to understand something," she said, her voice low. "Mom, I'd after dinner. We're having champagne. Photos, This is Chelsea's night, her moment. She turned then, her eyes hard and cold. And then she leaned in close and whispered words that I'll never forget. Stay out of the celebration. Don't make this about you. Don't embarrass this family more than you already have. The words hit me like a physical blow. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. I had spent years of my entire life trying to earn her approval, trying to be enough. But in that moment, standing in that kitchen, I realized I never would be. I would never be enough for Patricia Richardson. I understand, I whispered, barely audible. I set down the plates with shaking hands and walked back to the dining room, feeling completely hollow inside. Back at the table, dessert was served. Mom brought out expensive champagne, crystal flutes gleaming in the candlelight. Before we toast, she announced, I want to say how proud we are of Chelsea. She represents everything this family stands for: excellence, dedication, success. I sat at the far end of the table, trying to disappear into the wallpaper. I noticed Dad's hands gripping his napkin, his knuckles white. Marcus added, Chelsea couldn't have done it without the Richardson name backing her. This family's reputation opened doors. Chelsea beamed. I'm just grateful to make you all proud. Mom raised her glass. Everyone followed suit, everyone except Dad, who sat frozen in his chair. To Chelsea. Suddenly, Dad stood up. The scrape of his chair against the hardwood floor was deafening in that elegant room. Everyone froze. Glasses hung in midair. All eyes turned to him. I had never seen my father look like that. Not angry but determined. Like a man who'd finally reached his breaking point after years of silence. Before we toast, he said, his voice shaking but firm, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said 28 years ago. Mom's smile faltered. Richard. Not now. Yes, Patricia. Right now. He looked directly at me, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. Emma, you deserve to know the truth, and this family needs to hear it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The entire table was frozen, confused, waiting. Dad took a breath, and then he said the words that would change everything. You're not. And that's where I'll pause for now, because what my father said next, it shattered everything. I thought I knew about myself, my family, and my entire life. My father stood at the head of that table, about to reveal a secret that had haunted him for nearly 3 decades. My mother's face had gone white. My sister looked confused, and I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. You're not the disappointment, Emma, Dad said, his voice breaking. You never were. He took a shaky breath, tears streaming down his face now. Patricia isn't your biological mother. The words detonated like a bomb in that quiet dining room. Chelsea's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the fine china plate. Marcus's mouth fell open. Aunt Diane gasped. And me? I felt the entire room spinning. What? I barely managed to whisper. Mom stood abruptly, fury and panic twisting her face. Richard, stop this. Stop this right now. No. Dad's voice was louder, firmer than I'd ever heard it. I've been silent for too long. I've watched you treat her like she was less than Chelsea for years, and I won't do it anymore. He looked at me with such love and regret that it hurt to meet his eyes. Your mother, your biological mother, her name was Sarah. Sarah Chen. My legs gave out. I sat heavily, gripping the edge of the table to keep from falling. And then my father told us a story that had been buried for 28 years. I met Sarah in the summer of 1996, Dad began. I was working at Northwestern Hospital as a medical resident. She was a nurse, brilliant, kind, with this laugh that could light up the darkest room. He paused, lost in memory. Patricia and I had been married 3 years by then. It was arranged by our family's a merger of 2 successful Chicago families. She wanted the Richardson name, the social standing. I don't know what I wanted back then. But I wasn't happy. We weren't happy. I could see Mom's jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. Sarah and I fell in love, Dad continued. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I'm proud of, but it was real. More real than anything I'd ever felt. He looked down at his hands. When Sarah got pregnant, we were terrified but excited. We planned to leave, start over. I was going to file for divorce, move to Seattle where she had family. We were going to raise you together, Emma. Chelsea interrupted, her voice stunned. Dad, how could you? You don't understand what it's like to live in a loveless marriage, he said, looking at her with sad eyes. To feel like you're just playing a role every single day. He turned back to me. Sarah was 8 months pregnant when it happened. His voice broke completely, and I saw the weight of decades of grief crushing him. It was December 1996. Sarah was driving home from her shift at the hospital. Black ice on Lakeshore Drive. She lost control of the car. I felt my chest tighten, knowing what was coming. The paramedics got her to the hospital. My hospital. I was working that night. I heard the call come in over the radio, and some instinct made me go down to her. Dad covered his face with his hands. When I saw it was her, God, Emma, I've never felt terror like that in my life. She was bleeding. Critical condition. The baby you were in distress. Tears were streaming down my face now. The entire table was silent except for quiet crying. They had to do an emergency C-section to save you. Sarah made me promise to save you first. Whatever happened to her, save the baby. He was crying openly now, not caring who saw. She died on the operating table. Hemorrhaging they couldn't stop. But you were perfect. Tiny, but perfect. 3 pounds, 6 ounces. She never got to hold you. The room was absolutely silent. Even the children had stopped coloring, sensing something terrible and important was happening. I finally found my voice. Then how? Why am I here? Why did she? I looked at Patricia with new eyes, with horror and betrayal burning in my chest. Sarah had no family in Chicago, Dad explained. Her parents had passed away years before, and she was estranged from her brother. I was listed as your father on the birth certificate, but I was married. Patricia found out about you within days. Mom finally spoke, her voice like ice. Your father came to me with a bastard child and a dead mistress. Can you imagine the scandal? The shame to the Richardson name? I stood up, anger replacing shock. So what? You took me in out of the goodness of your heart. I gave you a home. Patricia snapped, a name, everything. She gave me an ultimatum, Dad said firmly. We could adopt you. Tell everyone you were ours, that she'd given birth while I was finishing my residency out of state. The timeline worked. No one would question it. Or she'd divorce me, expose everything, and you'd go into the foster system. He looked at me with infinite sadness. I chose you, Emma. I chose to raise you. But the price was? Patricia made me agree to never tell you the truth. To let her raise Chelsea as the real daughter. To let you grow up thinking you were less than. It was the only way she'd agree to take you in. And suddenly, everything made sense. The coldness, the favoritism, the constant feeling that I didn't belong. I didn't belong not to her. I never had. Chelsea stood up, her voice rising with emotion. So our entire lives have been a lie? Mom, you've been what? Punishing Emma for something she had no control over. I raised her, Mom said defensively. I fed her, clothed her, paid for her education. You tolerated me. I shouted, rage breaking through the shock. You made me feel like I was never good enough, like I was broken somehow. And all along, you were just punishing me for existing, for being born. Mom's mask cracked slightly. Your father had an affair. He destroyed our marriage. You were a constant reminder of his betrayal, Dad slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Don't you dare put this on Emma. She was an innocent child. You agreed to take her in, but you never agreed to love her. That was your choice, Patricia. Your cruelty was your choice. Aunt Diane whispered to Uncle Tom. Oh my God. All these years, we never knew. Chelsea looked at me with tears in her eyes. Emma, I didn't know. I swear, I never knew why Mom treated you differently. I thought it was just. I don't know what I thought. I laughed bitterly. You didn't question it because it benefited you. You got all the love, all the praise, everything. Why would you ask why? Mom grabbed her wine glass, drank deeply, trying to maintain control even as everything fell apart. You want to know the truth, she said. Fine. Yes, I resented you. Every time I looked at you, I saw his betrayal. I saw the woman he loved more than me. Her voice wavered with genuine pain, and for the first time, I saw her as something other than the villain in my story. Do you know what it's like to raise another woman's child? To see your husband look at her baby with more love than he ever showed your own daughter? That's not true, Dad started, isn't it? Mom turned on him. You think I didn't notice? Every school play, every birthday, you were more present for Emma than you ever were for Chelsea. Chelsea, the daughter we planned, the one from our marriage. Chelsea looked stunned, hurt by this revelation she'd never seen coming. Dad, she said quietly. Chelsea, I love you, Dad began, torn and anguished. But not the way you love Sarah's child, Mom finished. Never the same way. A new wound had been opened. I had spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't enough. But in that moment, I realized Chelsea had to, just in a different way. I never knew. I said softly to Chelsea, I never wanted to take anything from you. Chelsea's tears fell freely now, but you did, without even trying. And God, Emma, I'm so sorry for every mean thing I ever said, every time I made you feel small. I was just following Mom's lead, trying to stay in her good graces. Dad suddenly stood and left the room. We sat in uncomfortable silence until he returned carrying a weathered cardboard box wrapped with a faded blue ribbon. These were Sarah's, he said, setting the box in front of me with trembling hands. Things she left in her locker at the hospital. Things I couldn't bear to look at for years, but couldn't throw away. She would have wanted you to have them. With shaking fingers, I opened the box. Inside, I found a nurse's badge with a photo of a beautiful Asian woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. A journal daubed photos. A small jade bracelet. Letters. I picked up the journal, opened it to a random page. The handwriting was neat and warm. I read aloud, my voice breaking, December 3rd, 1996. Richard and I felt the baby kick today during rounds. He placed his hand on my belly, and we just stood there in the supply closet, crying and laughing. We decided that if it's a girl, we'll name her Emma, after his grandmother, who he says was the kindest person he ever knew. I'm scared about what comes next, but when I feel this little life inside me, I know it's worth it. Richard says she'll be beautiful and strong. I know she'll be loved. I clutched the journal to my chest, sobbing. For the first time in my life, I felt connected to someone who truly wanted me. Someone who chose me before I even took my first breath. There are photos of her, Dad said gently, stories. She was keeping a journal for you, writing down everything she wanted you to know. I found a photo, Sarah in scrubs, about 7 months pregnant, glowing, standing next to my young father. They looked truly, genuinely happy. She looks kind, I whispered. She was the kindest person I've ever known, Dad said through tears. And she would be so proud of you, Emma, of the artist you've become, the strong, compassionate woman you are despite everything. I stood up, holding the box like it was the most precious thing in the world. I understand now why you couldn't love me, I said to Patricia. But you could have been neutral. You could have been kind. Instead, you spent 28 years making sure I knew I wasn't wanted. I gave you a home she started. You gave me a roof and resentment. I cut her off. That's not a home. That's a prison. I turned to my father. And you, Dad, you knew all along. You watched her treat me like dirt, and you never stopped it. You never protected me. I know, he said, broken. I'm so sorry, Emma. I was a coward. I was afraid of losing you entirely if Patricia left. I thought it was better for you to have some family than none at all. You let me grow up thinking I was the problem, I said, that I wasn't good enough. Do you know how much therapy I've needed? How many years I spent hating myself? I picked up the box and walked toward the door. Chelsea stood. Emma, wait, I'm sorry. Chelsea, I'm sorry your celebration got ruined. I'm sorry our whole family is built on lies. But I can't be here right now. I can't breathe in this house. Dad called after me. Emma, please, don't shut me out. I paused at the doorway, not turning back. I'm not shutting you out, Dad. I'm just finding my way to Sarah, to the mother who actually wanted me. And I walked out into the cold November night, leaving the shattered family behind, carrying more than a box of memories. I carried the weight of a love I'd never known, and the freedom of finally understanding who I was. But the real journey was just beginning. They say the truth will set you free. But first, it tears apart everything you thought you knew, everyone you thought you were. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I sat in a coffee shop in Seattle, staring at an address I'd found in Sarah's journal. Rain streamed down the windows, and the box of her belongings sat on the table beside my laptop. I had spent those 3 weeks reading every word she'd written, every page of her journals, every letter, every note. I had memorized her handwriting, studied her photos, tried to piece together the mother I'd never known. And I had found something. Sarah's brother, David Chen, an address in Seattle, in a neighborhood called Ballard. My uncle, a person who didn't even know I existed. My phone rang. Chelsea's name flashed on the screen. Hey, I answered. Hey, how are you? Her voice was tentative, careful. I'm in Seattle. Seattle. Emma, you just left. You didn't tell anyone where you were going. We've been worried. I needed space, I said. I needed to learn about Sarah. Dad gave me everything in that box, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know more. There was a pause on the line. Things here have been tense, Chelsea said. Mom's not handling it well. She moved into the guest room. Dad's devastated. He keeps asking if you'll talk to him. I'm not ready yet. Emma, I've been thinking a lot about what you said at Thanksgiving, about me following Mom's lead. You were right. I was so focused on being perfect, on meeting her impossible expectations, that I never questioned why she treated you so differently. I could hear the emotion creeping into her voice. I was a terrible sister, and I am sorry. If you'll let me, I want to be better. I want to know you, really know you. Not just as the family disappointment, but as Emma, my sister. Tears welled up in my eyes. That means a lot, Chelsea. Thank you. What are you going to do in Seattle? I found her brother, David Chen. He lives here in Ballard. I'm going to try to meet him today. Do you want me to come with you? Chelsea offered. I can get on a flight. No, I said softly. I need to do this alone. But thank you. After we hung up, I sat there for another hour, gathering courage. Finally, I stood up, grabbed the box, and headed to the address. The house was a modest craftsman in a quiet neighborhood. Beautiful, well-maintained, with a small garden in front despite the winter weather. I stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes, terrified. Finally, I walked up to the door and knocked. The door opened, and a man stood there, mid-50s, kind eyes, graying hair, wearing a flannel shirt. He looked at me, and his face went completely white. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Sarah." He gripped the door frame like his legs might give out. "I'm sorry. You look so much like her. Murdoch Chen?" My voice was shaking. "My name is Emma Richardson. I think I'm your niece." David Chen's eyes flooded with tears. He stepped forward, then stopped himself, uncertain. "Emma, Sarah's baby. You're alive. You're here." He was crying openly now. "Please, come in, please." Inside, the house was warm and filled with books and family photos. David made tea with shaking hands, and we sat in his living room while I told him everything. About growing up with Patricia's coldness. About the Thanksgiving dinner. About my father's revelation. About finding Sarah's box. David listened, pain and anger crossing his face. "I tried to find you," he said when I finished. "After Sarah died, I tried everything. But Richard, your father, he said you'd been adopted. That it was better for you to have a fresh start. He wouldn't tell me where you were. I looked for years, Emma. I never stopped looking." He was protecting his secret, I said. His marriage. His reputation. David shook his head. "Sarah and I had a fight before she moved to Chicago. Something stupid about her career choices. I can't even remember the details now. We didn't speak for 3 years. I was too proud, too stubborn. And then she was gone, and I never got to tell her I was sorry." He pulled out a photo album from a bookshelf. "She called me 2 weeks before the accident," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Said she was pregnant, that she'd met someone, that they were planning to move here to Seattle. She wanted to reconcile. She wanted me to meet you." He showed me photos I'd never seen. Sarah as a child, smiling with missing front teeth. As a teenager, in a volleyball uniform. At nursing school, wearing scrubs for the first time, looking so young and hopeful. A whole life I'd never known. She was brilliant, David said. Top of her nursing class. She wanted to specialize in pediatrics because she loved kids so much. She would have been an amazing mother. Emma. The best. "I wish I'd known her," I said, crying. "She knew you," David said firmly. "For 8 months, she carried you, talked to you, loved you with everything she had. That counts, Emma. That counts more than you know." He took my hand, and I felt a connection I'd never felt with Patricia in 28 years. "You have her kindness in your eyes," he said, "and you're wearing her mother's jade bracelet." He touched the bracelet on my wrist, the one from Sarah's box. "That was our mother's, passed down through generations. Sarah was supposed to give it to her daughter someday. And here you are, wearing it, just like she would have wanted." Over the next few days, David introduced me to his wife, Lisa, and their 2 kids, my cousins. They welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked, no judgment. David took me to Sarah's favorite spots in Seattle. Pike Place Market, where she used to buy flowers every Sunday. Discovery Park, where she'd go to think. The hospital where she trained. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not because of obligation or tolerance, but because they genuinely wanted me there. On my last evening before flying back to Chicago, David and I sat in his living room, going through more of Sarah's things. He'd kept things he wanted me to have. Her nursing school diploma, he said, handing me a framed certificate. Photos from her graduation. Letters she wrote me after we finally reconciled, right before she died. "I can't take everything," I protested. "Emma, you're her legacy," David said firmly. "These belong to you, and I hope you'll stay in touch. Visit when you can. You have family here now, real family who wants to know you." I hugged him tight, crying into his shoulder. "I'd like that. I'd really like that." My phone buzzed. My father's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it. "You should talk to him eventually," David said gently. "He made terrible mistakes, but Sarah loved him. That has to mean something." I nodded, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. When I returned to Chicago a few days later, I couldn't avoid it anymore. Dad had been calling, texting, leaving voicemails. Finally, I agreed to meet him. We met at a quiet park near Lake Michigan, the same park where he told me he and Sarah used to walk together. It was late afternoon, a cold December wind whipping off the lake. Dad stood when he saw me approaching. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Emma, thank you for agreeing to meet. We sat on a bench overlooking the gray water. The silence was awkward, heavy with everything unsaid. I met David, I finally said. Sarah's brother. Dad looked surprised, then relieved. How is he? Wonderful. Kind. He told me about Sarah, about their family, about the life she wanted to give me. Dad nodded, tears forming in his eyes again. I'm sorry, Emma, for all of it. For not protecting you from Patricia's cruelty, for not telling you the truth sooner, for being too weak to leave when I should have 28 years ago. Why did you finally tell me? I asked. After all these years, why that night? Because I saw Patricia about to hurt you again, he said. I saw her dismissing you, excluding you from your own family's celebration. And I realized that my silence had hurt you far more than the truth ever could. I was protecting myself, my comfort, my fear of losing you, not you. He turned to face me fully. You asked me if I loved Chelsea less than you. The truth is, I loved you both, but you were Sarah's. And losing Sarah destroyed me in ways I've never recovered from. Maybe I did hold onto you tighter because you were all I had left of her. That wasn't fair to Chelsea. It wasn't fair to anyone. What happens now? I asked. With you and Patricia? We're separating, Dad said. We should have ended this marriage decades ago. We're only still together because of fear and habit and that damn Richardson reputation. It's time to stop pretending. He took my hand carefully, like he was afraid I'd pull away. I don't expect you to forgive me, Emma. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that Sarah loved you desperately, and so do I. I failed as a father in so many ways, but my love for you was never fake. It was the one real thing in that house. I sat there, looking at this man who'd been a silent observer of my pain for so long. I know, Dad, I finally said. I know you loved me. I just wish you'd been brave enough to show it when it mattered. We sat together in silence, watching the waves, two people trying to figure out how to rebuild something that had been broken from the very beginning. They say home is where the heart is. I used to think that meant the place you grew up, but I learned it means the place and the people where you feel loved for who you actually are. 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving dinner, I stood in a Chicago art gallery, surrounded by my paintings. The walls were white, the lighting perfect, and the room was packed with people who'd come to see my work. My first solo exhibition. Every painting was inspired by Sarah, her life, her memory, the love she'd had for me even though we never met. I'd poured 6 months of grief, discovery, and healing into these canvases. The centerpiece hung in the middle of the main wall. I had spent 3 months on it. A portrait of Sarah in her nurse's scrubs, holding a baby me looking down with infinite love on her face. The title read, The Mother I Never Knew, but Always Had. I stood beside it, watching people admire the work, whispering about the emotion captured in the brushstrokes. David and his family had flown in from Seattle. Lisa hugged me tight when they arrived. Sarah would be so proud, she whispered. My cousins to teenagers I'd only known for 6 months stood looking at the paintings with genuine interest. Family I'd never known I had. Chelsea came with her kids. She'd been coming to therapy, working through her own issues with her mother, with her childhood, with the pressure she felt to be perfect. She approached me carefully. It's beautiful, Emma. All of it. You're incredibly talented. Thanks for coming, I said, meaning it. I wouldn't miss it. And Emma, I know I've said this before, but I need you to really hear it. I'm sorry for every time I made you feel less than, for following mom's lead instead of thinking for myself. I'm working on being better, on being the sister you deserved all along." I smiled at her. "I know. And I'm working on letting you." Chelsea's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that." Throughout the evening, people approached me, asking about the story behind the paintings. I told them, in broad strokes, about Sarah, about discovering I had a mother who'd wanted me desperately, about learning that sometimes the family that loves you isn't the family you were born into. It is the family you find. My father came to the exhibition too. He stood at the back, quiet but present. We'd been slowly rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. There was so much hurt, so much lost time. But he was trying, and I was learning to let him. He'd filed for divorce from Patricia 2 months after Thanksgiving. She fought it at first, then realized she had no leverage left. The perfect Richardson marriage was ending after 31 years of pretending. I hadn't spoken to Patricia since that night. She tried reaching out once through Chelsea, but I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Some wounds don't heal just because time passes. But I was healing in other ways. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself alone in the gallery with David. He stood in front of the centerpiece painting, tears streaming down his face. "It's perfect," he said. "You captured her exactly. That expression, that's the look she had when she talked about you. Pure love. I used the photos you gave me," I said, "and your stories, and Dad's. I tried to paint who she was, not just what she looked like." "You succeeded," David said, putting his arm around my shoulders. "Emma, I want you to know something. Sarah didn't get to raise you, but her love has been there all along. In your kindness, in your creativity, in your strength to survive in that house with Patricia. That's Sarah's legacy living through you." I leaned against him. This uncle I'd only known for half a year, but who felt more like family than the people I'd grown up with. "Thank you for finding me," I whispered, "for welcoming me, for giving me a piece of her. Thank you for being brave enough to knock on my door," he said. "You gave me back my sister in a way I never expected. Every time I look at you, I see her, and it doesn't hurt anymore, it heals." After everyone left, I stood alone in the gallery, looking at my work. Months of painting, of processing, of grieving and discovering and healing. I touched the jade bracelet on my wrist. Sarah's bracelet. Her mother's bracelet. Now mine. I thought about that terrible Thanksgiving dinner. About my mother Patricia whispering those cruel words. "Stay out of the celebration." But she'd never really been my mother, had she? My real mother had left me a different legacy. One of love and sacrifice and hope. I pulled out my phone and looked at a photo David had given me. Sarah at 28, the same age I was now, standing in front of the hospital, smiling at the camera, young and full of life, not knowing she only had months left. "I'm making you proud," I whispered to the photo. "I'm living the life you wanted for me. I'm creating. I'm loving. I'm finding my people, just like you would have wanted." For years, I felt like I was drowning in my own family, but I'd finally learned to swim. Not because the water got calmer, but because I stopped trying to stay in a place that was never meant to be my home. I looked at my reflection in the gallery window. I saw my own face, but I also saw Sarah's features, her eyes, her smile, the shape of her face. She was there. She'd always been there. Home isn't always where you start. Sometimes it's where you choose to belong. It's the people who see you for who you really are and love you anyway. It's the place where you can breathe freely, create openly, exist without apology. I had spent 28 years in a beautiful house that felt like a prison. But I'd found my real home in the memories of a woman I never met, in the family I didn't know I had, in the art I created to honor her memory. My mother whispered stay out of the celebration that Thanksgiving night, but she was never really my mother. My real mother left me a legacy of love that no amount of resentment could erase. And in finding her, I finally found myself. I looked one more time at the painting of Sarah holding baby me, and I smiled. Thank you, I said softly, for everything, for loving me before I was born, for fighting to save me, for the journals and the memories and the family I found because of you. Thank you for being my mom, even though we never got to meet. The gallery lights reflected off the painting, making it almost seem like Sarah was glowing, like she was there with me, proud of the woman I'd become. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, utterly at peace. I belonged, not to the Richardson family with their perfect facade and dark secrets, but to myself, to Sarah's memory, to the family that chose to love me, to the art I created, to the truth I'd finally found. My name is Emma Richardson, but I'm also Emma Chen, daughter of Sarah, niece of David, artist, survivor, and finally someone who knows where she belongs. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.